Hello again. Some things to clean up from yesterday. I had the word plaintiff on the board. I'm not sure if I spelled it right. There might be two F's. It doesn't matter, really. I could have looked it up. I didn't bother. But I noticed that. Now, Newt Gingrich. I have his name up there. I'm certainly not telling you should vote for him. Certainly not. But I thought of something related to this course. Recently, and those of you that are not American, you probably don't know about this, but he was involved in a debate, and he was asked he was asked at the very beginning of the debate if he would like to respond to something that had come up that was very scandalous, involving his first wife, I think it was. Anyway, why I mention it is when he was asked that, right at the beginning of the debate, his answer was no. The question went, would you like to respond to this? And he said, no, but I will. And his timing was perfect. Why I mention this now is because there was ellipsis. I had just taught about ellipsis. Maybe one L, I don't know. Ellipsis. He said no, and the entire audience understood the rest of the sentence, which was, I would not like to respond to that matter. And he paused long enough that in their minds they could. And then he said, but I will respond to that matter. Perfect example of ellipsis in a sentence. And although grammar and syntax are behind us, I do like to point out that if you're aware of grammar and syntax, you can see the world. You see the world slightly differently, maybe. Anyway, it was very effective. All right. Now, when I say Viking culture, we're moving along in the chronological survey, and when I say Viking culture, Viking language, actually, I'm being very rough with this. I'm including Germanic within that, which in a way is not right. I should maybe say Northern European. But that word Viking has sort of fired the imagination for years. And I was dealing with students who were 12, 13, 14 years old. And so it was easier to just put the word Viking in there. Oh, we're thinking about Vikings now. All right, and still one other thing. In that movie I asked you to look at, 13th Warrior, it says here, this was based on this novel. It was originally called Eaters of the Dead. Well, in it, I do want to point out that how funny that one section is where the Arabs are grossed out. The Arab is so grossed out by the ways of the Vikings. Their morning hygiene. Well, in fact, the Arabs were and continue to be very clean people. Back in those days, they actually bathed themselves. They took baths. And Vikings, that was unheard of. And so they joke about that within that movie, that here's an Arab going up into this filthy land of the Vikings. All right, now going on. Beowulf. If you're taking notes, which in this course you should be, if you're really taking the entire course, you should have gradually a beautiful set of notes growing. And within your notes, in the 18th section, Dark Ages, under the Viking culture, you should write down Beowulf and you should underline it, because it is book length. It's not short. It is the epic of the English language. It is a treasure of the English language. I discovered it. I found out about it when I was in 10th grade, I think, so when I was 16. And I'm a slow reader. I had once told that, I think, in a class, maybe more than once. It's the only book that I can recall that I had ever read cover to cover in one sitting. I took that to when I got a copy for myself, a cheap paperback copy, I took it to my bedroom and I read the whole thing. And partly I guess, is because it's a great story. But I think partly was because this, to me, was so exciting to be able to be reaching back over 1,000 years to a story that was written at that time or sung at that time first, because it was a true epic. It was sung and then eventually written down. This was the real thing. This wasn't like reading fiction or books for young people. I loved it. And for a lot of my life, I wondered, why don't they make that into a movie, into a great movie? It's a great story. Well, they finally did, I feel. But let me very quickly run the story by you. I say with Hrothgar and his mead hall. Mead hall. Well, all right. Beowulf is a young warrior. He's a Swede, a Geat, and he finds out that there's a monster named Grendel who is a curse upon the mead hall that Hrothgar has built. Hrothgar is a Dane. And a mead hall, I boxed that because within northern Viking culture, and Germanic too probably, the role of the mead hall is so important. The mead hall was almost the center of the world. I think the Vikings imagined that heaven must be a mead hall. Maybe someday I'll make this a mead hall. That would be fun. Anyway, it was a place where men drank and they fought and they laughed and they sang stories of like Beowulf. Viking kings didn't build castles or fortresses, they built mead halls. An open fire in the middle, no chimney, smoke just finding its way out. Cold, probably drafty, filthy. The animals may be in there too. But anyway, a mead hall. Hrothgar had built a wonderful mead hall, but there was a monster named Grendel that was plaguing it. Grendel could not stand to hear men being happy. And when they'd be singing and laughing and fighting and having a good old time, Grendel, a monster, would come down and smash in the door and kill Vikings left and right, carry some off to eat them, dive into his swamp. And Grendel, we're told, was one of the offspring of Cain, who had killed his brother Abel. That's not in the Bible, but that's some explanation of where he came from. Well, anyway, Beowulf hears about this, and here's a chance for glory, he feels, if he could free Hrothgar's hall of this monster. And glory to the Vikings, who were not yet Christian, was as good as eternal life, because people would never forget them. So he talks a bunch of young guys into joining him. They build a boat, sail there, are confronted by a coast guard who has to know who they are, but then who leads them to Hrothgar's hall. Hrothgar's been sitting, the hall's empty. Grendel leaves it alone as long as it's quiet and empty. But if they start to party, then Grendel hears that and comes after them. Well, Hrothgar makes him welcome. They party, and sure enough, Grendel hears it, and he comes down. Now, Grendel has a magic spell on his hide. Nothing can pierce his hide. No edge, a little bit like Achilles in the Greek stories. And Beowulf knows this. Well, he finds it out. Anyway, his sword is no good. So it ends up being a wrestling match between Beowulf and Grendel. Eventually Grendel realizes that Beowulf is stronger than he is and desperately wants to get away. Grendel grabs his claw and won't let go. And Grendel so badly wants to get away, eventually that claw rips right out of his shoulder and Beowulf's left holding his arm. Grendel goes off to his swamp to die, and they hoist the arm up to the rafters and party all over again. Well, that's the first monster that Beowulf kills. But then, the very next day, I think, Grendel's mother, it turns out that Grendel was not by himself. Grendel was living with his mother, another monster, and she comes down, kills some Vikings. Beowulf has to then go to fight her, and has to dive down into the swamp and come up in a cave, in Grendel's cave, and there with this mighty sword, he's able to kill Grendel. But the sword is eaten away by her blood as it dissolves in it because it's so nasty. But he comes back, and now he's killed two monsters, the hall is free. Then the epic suddenly jumps to Beowulf the Old Man. And now he's an old king, back in Sweden, let's say, Geatland. And his kingdom is plagued by a dragon. Nobody is brave enough to go fight the dragon. So Beowulf, the old man, it's like an epic theme, the aged king who has to go back to battle. He fights the dragon. Only one is brave enough to go with him, and that's Wiglaf. And they go and fight this dragon, and Beowulf manages to get under the dragon to stab it in its weak spot. I like to ask the students, how do you kill a dragon? And they usually will know. There's somewhere, there's usually a missing scale. In Tolkien, in The Hobbit, they bring down a dragon with an arrow shot to the underbelly. Well, so he kills the dragon, but as the dragon dies, he sinks his claws into Beowulf's neck, and there's poison, or not claws, fangs, and there's poison there. Beowulf dies of the poison, but he gives his kingdom on to Wiglaf, who was brave enough to go, and the epic ends with Beowulf's funeral. Well, there's a very quick version of it. Well, you might, if you watch this movie, 13th Warrior, and you think about that, you can see the connections. But if you go to the movie made, I think, in 2007, called Beowulf, semi-animated, I recommend it. It's gory, though. If you're a homeschooler and you've got children who are young, you might not want them to see it. There's nudity in it. It's animated nudity. It's strange. And it's very gory. But what I did was, with my students, I would show them the part where Beowulf is arriving at Hrothgar's hall, and I would not show them any of the fighting. Maybe at the very end, the dragon swooping around. I wanted them to see the mead hall and to see a little bit of it. And the one other thing I want to tell you about this is, at first I didn't know what to make of the fact that they had changed that story, but eventually I got very comfortable with it. They made, I don't want to spoil the story for you, but they made Grendel actually be the offspring of Hrothgar. Grendel was Hrothgar's son, which he had to a monster, Grendel's mother, portrayed to be beautiful. Here, they were confronted with this gap in the epic, and here's the way they solved it. And they managed to tie the stuff together so that Beowulf actually, and the dragon, yes. What they do then is Beowulf, instead of just killing Grendel's mother, Beowulf mates with Grendel's mother, and the offspring from that mating is the dragon. So now, once again, we've got father against son, the rebellious son. This is an epic theme. Back in the notes in section 4.1, you'll find Oedipus there. You'll find Absalom there, maybe even Adam, I suggested. There's an epic theme. So I got comfortable with what they did for the need of having a movie that fit together. I approve of it. I wasn't sure at first. I recommend it highly. I'm not sure. I didn't spend as much time trying to figure out how you could get it. It's probably on YouTube. I'm sure you could rent it. Be sure you get the modern one. I want to say it was in 2007 that it came out, but I'm not sure. All right, I think that should do it for today. See you tomorrow.